Hey eBay sellers, it's Suzanne A. Wells and welcome back to another Money Making Monday. This is a vintage edition, so a little disco music to get you into that vintage mode. These sales were taken from my Facebook group on the Money Making Monday thread, which we have every Monday, and sellers post what they found, where they found it, how much they paid for it, and show us the actual sold listing so you can see what sells and how much you can make on certain items. These sales were taken from the January 13th thread of 2020. So, just a reference point there if you are watching this in the future. So, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Olivia sold these vintage buttons. She had about 50 cents in this, had for about 6 months, and they sold for $10. Okay, Olivia's probably not going to become a millionaire selling vintage buttons, but I included this one to tell you that items in vintage packaging are often bought for the packaging itself, not necessarily the item inside. It could be a collector, it could be someone who's going to display these items in a business, or it could be for a movie or TV show prop. So keep that in mind when you see items in vintage packaging. If the packaging itself looks good, give that a try selling it because you don't know what the end buyer is going to use it for. But vintage packaging is a great thing to sell. It's easy to ship, and the more we go into the future and things get older, the more they're going to be worth. Okay, we've got Laura. She said, I love selling mid century modern wall art. Listed for about 6 months, purchased for about 5 cents at a church rummage sale. Not a huge sale, but I'll take it. This is a pair of vintage Hollywood Regency metal gold tone wood butterflies wall art set, and she sold these for $10. She also added that I've been in the ICU with my husband for a month and go home about once a week. I extended my handling time to 10 business days and have still been making sales. So, Laura did share with me that her husband has a chronic illness and is in and out of the hospital a lot, and this is their normal life right now. So, for those of you out there that are disabled, dealing with illnesses, are a caregiver, and really anybody who has a life crisis and you have to put your eBay business on hold, you can just extend that handling time and do what you can do because life is unpredictable and things are going to happen. So you just have to figure out a way to keep things going that works for you and get back to it when you can. Okay, Eileen paid $2 for these vintage drawer pulls at a yard sale. Took about 6 months to sell, sold for full asking price of $22.99 plus shipping. So these came off somebody's drawers or cabinets somewhere. They ended up at a yard sale, and these are great sellers because vintage is in. It's popular. Some of these designs from years ago they don't make anymore. Could be that somebody's trying to match something or they just like that vintagey antique look. And if you find something like this, don't even worry about cleaning it. Well, what I meant to say there is don't spend hours and hours cleaning it. Obviously you're going to wipe it off, get the dirt off of it, but people like that antique vintagey look and that shabby chic farmhouse kind of look. So they may not want it polished. So just list it as is and see how that goes. The people who are experts in vintage hardware, they say don't polish it. Just sell it the way it is and let the end buyer do what they want to do with it. They can see through the tarnish and the patina to what the item actually is. So use your time wisely. You don't have to clean everything and make it look perfect. Some people want it to look rustic and used. Okay, Allison, vintage 90s IB diffusion cardigan sweater. She purchased this at a thrift store for $2. There were some stains, which she could not get out. Some of the beads were loose, which I disclosed in the listing, and it still sold for full asking price of $34.11 plus shipping. Took about 2 months to sell. Great example of an item does not have to be perfect to sell. I know there's a lot of you kind of OCD people out there that want everything to be perfect, and like I couldn't possibly list this item if it has a defect on it or it's not in perfect condition. You just have to get past that. You just have to get over it. I've got a link to a video below about selling imperfect, damaged, defective items, and it's fine. Things will still sell. If something is 30, 40 years old, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to have some blemishes on it. So spend a reasonable amount of time making the item look as good as possible for your photos, get it listed, and move on. Time is your most valuable asset. Diana paid 50 cents at a thrift store and sold for full price of $39.99 plus shipping after 3 months. This is a Bible for religious cults. It's called Walter Martin's Cults Reference Bible. Who knew there was even such a thing? Dated 1981. And Diana has been working on getting out of her comfort zone, selling more than just clothes and shoes. So, this is a great example of what you might find in the book section. Obviously, this probably stood out to her. It's not a James Patterson or John Grisham novel, which in the thrift stores there's like a zillion of those. Look for the things that are different, that stand out. Those are the ones that are going to make the most money. Scarcity creates value. So 50 cents and sold it for right at $40. Now we've got Beverly, bought at an estate sale about 3 months ago for $1. Sold for full price. This is a vintage World War II USMS United States Maritime Service child's costume. And this sold for $49. She paid $1 for it, and that is very vintage. And notice how she put costume in the title because that's probably what it's going to be used for. Dana, I bought this really cool scarf for 50 cents at a thrift store. Burt Reynolds died 2 days later, so even though it was unfortunate, I thought the timing was impeccable. However, it took almost a year and a half to sell. Took best offer of $50 and it's going to England. This is a Burt Reynolds scarf, neckerchief, blue and red, measuring 26 by 26, and she sold it for $50, paid 50 cents for it. Rachel paid $1.50 at a local thrift store, had listed it all through November and December, and it sold in January. This is a pair of Christmas figurines, like ceramic. They're two little boys in candy cane pajamas holding candles, and the company is Inarco. And just a little fun fact on this one: Inarco is the International Artware Corporation, started in 1960 by Irwin Garber in Cleveland, Ohio. The company was not Japanese, although these items were made in Japan. Just an FYI, when you're out there sourcing, items marked made in Japan or made in occupied Japan are a clue that they are vintage and may be valuable, so do more research. Like in the 80s and my lifetime, since I was born up until probably the mid 80s, like everything was made in Japan. It's kind of like made in China is now. So you know that is a timestamp on your item if it's made in Japan or even Taiwan. We saw that a lot. I actually have a friend that I used to babysit for who her and her husband were in the Navy, and they would do their Navy Reserve weekends over at Dobbins Air Force Base outside of Atlanta, and I would babysit for their little boy like from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on both Saturday and Sunday. And that was a long Baby City weekend, but it was good money at the time for me. But their little boy was born in Japan when they were stationed over there. So they had this big joke about, he was made in Japan and that he should be stamped that on his bottom, made in Japan. So I always remember that story when I see made in Japan. But anyway, just a little side note for you when you're sourcing out there. Most of the stuff you're going to see made in China is not going to be worth much. So look for things that are made not in China. And Japan is one of those stamps that you want to pay attention to because it could be worth something. So Rachel paid $1.50 for these and sold them for $54 in January. So this also proves that Christmas sells all year. If you have it, list it because you might be leaving money on the table because you assume people don't buy Christmas stuff all year. Ashley bought this little stool for $2 at Goodwill, took a best offer of $60 about a week after I listed it. This is a vintage wooden milking stool, three-legged. $2, sold it for $60. Beverly, last day of estate sale, so everything was half off. Paid $7.50, sold full price after several lowball offers in about a month. This is a vintage Magnavox boombox ghetto blaster. Yes, the giant radios we had back in the 80s. Everything got smaller in the 80s except for radios, and shoulder pads got bigger, and hairstyles. So she paid $7.50 and this sold for $65.59. Savannah, this was part of the doll and doll clothing lot I bought in the fall. She cost me approximately 12 cents and sold on best offer in 3 months. This is a vintage 1969 baby doll vinyl posable. 12 cents and sold it for $72. And I will bet you she was not perfect. The item description says, in good condition, very clean, the arms and legs move easily. Her hair has a couple of worn spots. See pictures. So that was done perfectly. Cora paid $14 at a thrift store, sold in less than 3 weeks for full asking price. This is a vintage Progress applique baby quilt kit. $14, sold for $75. Corey found these vintage 80s boots, new with tags, at a thrift store for about $8. Sold for best offer of $75 after about 4 months. And they are actually new, but vintage, 80s to 90s. Danex Austin 4 ankle boot, green. So those are funky looking for sure. Melissa paid $5 at an estate sale, took best offer of $75, only listed for a couple of weeks. There were no comps on this book that I could find, but I bought it because it was super old and looked cool and I priced it high. Happy with the price it brought. So $5 for this Farming for Profit hardcover book, and she sold it for $75. Brian paid $10 at a garage sale in December, had no idea what I could get, so listed at $99.99, took best offer of $75. This is a set of 4 Boeing golf club covers. And it says Boeing 737, 747, 757, and 7067. And just another fun fact on Boeing aircraft, the 757s are no longer made. That may have been one reason this went for so much money, is because they don't make that type of aircraft anymore. And just an FYI, in the late 1940s, numbers were assigned to each division of aircraft. 300s and 400s represented military, 500s were turbine engines, 600s were for rockets and missiles, and 700s were for jet transport. So now you know where those numbers come from. Okay, we've got Brian again, who paid $15.75 in a large buy I made from OfferUp posting in November. Sold this jacket for $75 plus shipping to Germany. This is a Kansas City Chiefs pro player jacket with hood, 1994 vintage. Okay, we've got Nancy. And she had to do a do-over on her posting, but she got it right. So kudos to you, Nancy, for following the system. This is the Werble teddy bear I bought for $1.50 at a thrift store and sold within 10 days for $79.95. He is a 1980s toy that responds to movement nearby by making truly obnoxious warbling noises, and his nose blinks red. So this is a rare electronic talking Werble Cuddle 1980s toy. She paid $1.50, sold it for $79.95. Okay, now we've got Lupita. She bought these at Savers on 50% off day for $6.75. Had over 1,000 views and 14 watchers in a month. Sent watchers an $85 offer plus shipping, and it's sold. This is men's size 14 brown Nike ACG Air Mock Rare Casual shoes. So they were $6.75. She sold them for $85. And just a side tip for those of you that haven't heard this yet, when you have something that has that many views and that many watchers, try raising the price because it creates a sense of urgency. And if you lower the price, people may wait for you to lower it more. So when you see you have a lot of interest, try raising the price, and that may cause some of those watchers to either make offers or buy it for full price. So you don't know until you play around with this, but it has worked for a lot of people in the past when you have a lot of interest on something to raise the price because they may think you're going to keep raising it, and you never know what you can get. You can always come down on your price, but you don't want to sell something that has a lot of interest for too cheap. You don't want to leave money on the table like that. So try that strategy. Okay, we've got Melissa, who sold this today to a buyer in Japan for $100 plus shipping. Listed for about 2 weeks and only paid 45 cents. This is Mr. Prickle Pants from Toy Story. This is one that keeps popping up on the Money Making Mondays. I think this was the cover of a different video a few months ago. So he's out there and people are finding him. This is Mr. Prickle Pants. That's just fun to say. Prickle Pants. 45 cents and sold for 100, and she said it went to Japan. They are crazy for some of our characters over here, and they will pay up for these items like the hidden Mickeys. So if you're not shipping internationally, put that on your list of things to learn this year so you can get more sales. Sean, I found a dinner program for JFK in Austin, Texas. He never made it, obviously because he was shot when he was on that trip to Texas. There were a few listed and my copy had some condition issues. Paid $2 at an estate sale, sold on best offer for $100. This is truly a piece of American history. So you just never know where these things are going to pop up. There's probably stuff like this in people's attics and basements, and then either they downsize and move or get moved to assisted living or perhaps pass away and their stuff gets donated, and here it is in front of us. So the stuff's out there and it pops up. So this was a fun sale, $2, and she sold it for $100. Now we've got Anastasia. I literally just listed this in the morning and within an hour it got sold for full asking price. I bought a huge lot of vintage board games with this for $40. First fast flip ever. This is a vintage 1962 Ideal brand Gaylord Hound Dog on the leash. And let's see, she said, how much did she pay for this? Okay, it was in a box of a whole bunch of other stuff. So she got $125 for this toy. So good for her. Now we've got Cindy. Purchased for $8 at a local church thrift on Friday. Sold the same day as listed for full asking price plus shipping. This is a vintage camel hair coat from Saks Fifth Avenue. Nice. $8, and she sold it for $149.99 the same day she listed it. So this is one that should encourage you to get your items listed because they can sell within minutes or hours. And if you need some motivation or some accountability partners, join my challenge. It's free. There's a bunch of people that have joined this, and we're just trying to do better this year with tackling death piles or picking better items that result in higher profit. People have all kinds of goals. So the link to that is below the video. Come on over and join us, and let's get there in 2020, get those death piles tackled and move forward. Shelly, my husband found this while we were thrifting, paid $1.25. This is a vintage puzzle from 1981. It sold for $150. That's a very cool looking puzzle of a Japanese building. $1.25, sold it for $150. Suzanne Tucker found this at the bins, listed last October and sold for $137.50. Buyer didn't pay, so I waited until after Christmas to relist. Sold it for $225.50, and it's paid for. This is some fabric, vintage flocked floral fabric, 8 yards with daisies, stripes, and leaves. And what did she say? She didn't say how much she paid for it. It just says found at the bins. But it sold for $225.50. She couldn't have paid more than $5 for this if she got it at the bins. Now we've got Luann, who always has fun vintage items. Paid 25 cents for these at an estate sale this past week. Bought several other packages as well for 25 cents each. These sold for $225 within 3 hours of listing. I priced higher than comps because there were none listed but a lot of solds. This is 3 pair of vintage Hanes Barely There sheer reinforced nylon stockings. And there was some conversation on this post about why do some sell for more than others, and how to determine how to price it. And I will refer you to the Vintage Fashion Guild for any type of vintage clothing, accessories, in this case pantyhose and stockings, to get that information of what's collectible, what are people looking for, why is this worth more than that. They have a lot of great articles over there on that site, so you can dig in and do your research there. Now we've got Brian again, paid $33 as part of a huge buy I made at a garage sale. Took best offer of $250. Brian does great with these jackets. He's always selling this collectible sports memorabilia stuff. So if you are into that niche, check out what Brian sells. This is a Milwaukee Brewers starter jacket, satin blue, authentic diamond, vintage, men's 2 extra large. And he paid $33 for this and took a best offer of $250. And now we've got Joanne, who bought this set for $190 at an auction, sold in a couple of hours for $500. This is a pair of Steuben glass lampshades, green, swirl, very vintage looking, $190 at auction, sold for $500 in just a few hours. So that should encourage you to get your stuff listed when expensive things like this sell so quickly. Okay, well, this is a shorter one, but I wanted to get a vintage edition video up for you because it's been a few months. Thanks so much for watching. Would love your comments below, and I will see you in the next video. Have a profitable and productive day on eBay. Bye.